Greetings, Disney adults, Disney fans of all ages, and welcome to my channel. For years, I have been a huge Disney fan. I took my first trip ever to Disney World when I was just 9 years old, and I've been blessed to be able to go back on many occasions since then. And when I was in college, I had the wonderful opportunity to be able to work at Disney for a period of time. I drove submarines for 20,000 leagues under the sea. It was a great joy and something I love doing. My family now are just as big a Disney fans as I am. And so I'm glad to be able to speak to you today. And I wanted to talk about a question that I get a lot from a lot of people that I know. And they ask the question, what do you think Walt would think of his park? And in particular, we're talking about what do you think Walt would think of Disney World? Disneyland, well, we know what Walt thought of Disneyland. I mean, he went there many times. He was known to make frequent visits to Disneyland just to hang out and spend time there. But sadly, Walt Disney passed away before Disney World even began construction. And so the park that he was looking at and working on and thinking about at the time of his death, he never got to experience. And so that's what people ask. What would Walt think of the parks now? Now, I could try to answer that question, what would Walt think of Disney World, but it would either be so short and brief and inconclusive that nobody would want to hear, or it would be so long and tedious that you would just get very bored. It would take hours to talk about. So instead, we're just going to talk about various questions that people may have. The first question I did want to ask applies to something that we're really noticing right now. At the time I'm recording it, this is December 2022. And something that has been on everybody's minds recently has been the closing of Splash Mountain for the Tiana's Bayou Adventure re-theme. A lot of people are upset about it. A lot of people don't like it. And so I want to ask the question, what would Walt think of this re-theme? So we're going to try to address that, and we're going to talk about that. Before we get into that, though, first thing we need to do is look at a little bit of the history of Splash Mountain. Where did it come from? Why is it there? To do that, we're going to have to go back in time, back many, many years. I fortunately have a time machine here, so we can just go back in time. Here we are. This is Disneyland. It's around the year 1984. 1984. Wait a minute. That's the same time I was driving submarines for 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Kind of like these. Well, a little different. This building is an attraction known as America Sings. America Sings was a show that occupied the same building that Carousel of Progress had opened. You see, after the massive success of Carousel of Progress, the 1964 World's Fair, it was moved to Disneyland. General Electric continued to sponsor the attraction, and in the late 60s, early 70s, when GE was asked, would you like to continue to sponsor Carousel of Progress, they said yes. But we want you to move it to the Magic Kingdom at Disney World. Disney executives did this, but it left them with a big empty theater in Tomorrowland. Well, it also happened to coincide with our nation's bicentennial celebration in 1976. So Imagineers came up with a cute show that they could put in that theater. The name of the show was America Sings. And it was a celebration of our nation's musical heritage through song. And it was very cute and very enjoyable. And it featured frontiersy woodland animals in Tomorrowland. Anyway, this attraction was there for several years, but after the nation's bicentennial celebration, it quickly became apparent that cute frontiersy woodland animals in Tomorrowland didn't make a whole lot of sense. So America Sings was probably on the way out anyway. Meanwhile, Disney Imagineers had been asked to come up with something else for Bear Country in Disneyland. At the time, Bear Country only contained one attraction, the Country Bear Jamboree. Executives suggested some kind of log flume type ride would work. Imagineers weren't quite so sure, but it was Master Imagineer Tony Baxter who came up with an idea, and an absolutely brilliant idea, supposedly while driving on the freeway one day. His idea was for a river ride through the briar patch of Brer Rabbit, Brer Fox, and Brer Bear, all characters from Disney's Song of the South. The idea was that you would go through and see the adventures of Brer Rabbit as he tries to escape from Brer Fox and Brer Bear, and it concludes with an exciting 40-foot drop at the end, all while you're riding in this log on the river. And you remember those America Sings animals? Well, we can repurpose them and place them in this same attraction. Wonderful theming, an exciting 40-foot drop at the end. It was a great idea. It was originally called the Zippity River Run, but then CEO Michael Eisner, who had just recently opened Touchstone Pictures, with one of their big movies being Splash, suggested Splash Mountain to kind of help promote the movie Splash. That was a thing. Splash Mountain opened at Disneyland in 1989. It was followed by versions of the ride opening up in Magic Kingdom at Disney World and at Tokyo Disney in 1992. And the ride quickly became a crowd favorite. It quickly became one of the most popular rides in all of the parks. I mean, let's face it. It is part dark ride with really cute theming. It is a boat ride, but that 40-foot drop at the end also makes it a thrill ride. It's a wonderful, fun, exciting ride for anybody and everybody. And it was well loved by pretty much everybody. But as in most things, there's another side. Brer Fox, Brer Rabbit, and Brer Bear are all characters that came out of the movie Song of the South, which was released in 1946 by the Disney Company. Song of the South is based on a book called Uncle Remus by Joel Chandler Harris. It tells the story of a little boy who has to go live with his grandmother, and she lives in Atlanta, Georgia during the Reconstructionist era in the South, post-Civil War. And there were a lot of people who protested the film's depiction of African Americans in the South. Now, the point of this video is not to debate whether someone should be offended or whether someone should not be offended. But suffice it to say, a significant number of people then, and a significant percentage of our population now, is offended by this movie. That is why the Disney Company has limited the re-release in theaters of this movie, and why this movie has never been released by Disney on VHS or DVD formats. And this led the Disney Company, or was a significant factor in the Disney Company deciding to re-theme Splash Mountain to Princess and the Frog, Tiana's Bayou Adventure. This decision was made before the closures of 2020, and we're now seeing it come to fruition. The ride will be closed on January 23rd, 2023, so that they can begin the official re-theme of the ride to create Tiana's Bayou Adventure. So, we're finally ready to come back to the original question. What would Walt think? Well, I'm going to tell you what I think Walt would think. And I'm going to begin with a quote, probably a quote many of you are very familiar with. Walt Disney is famous for saying, "Disneyland will never be completed. It will continue to grow as long as there is imagination left in the world." Walt Disney knew that the parks had to grow. He knew that they had to change. He knew that the parks would always be changing. It's a famous story about Walt Disney visiting Disneyland one time, and he overheard a young boy walking with his mother. The young boy was complaining and crying and saying he wanted to ride Jungle Cruise. His frazzled mother looked down at him and said, "No, we rode that last time we were here." And the story goes that Walt called his Imagineers together later that day and said, "We need to make some changes to Jungle Cruise." Change is a part of what happens every day in our world. And Walt recognized that. Walt would not want the Disney of today to be the same one that was there in 1972 or 1971. And I can't say that I blame him. Do I always like it when rides close? No. I'm a big Mr. Toad's Wild Ride fan, and I miss it. I'd love to ride Mr. Toad's Wild Ride. I can go to California, I guess, and ride it, but I digress. Sometimes we just need a perspective, just a little bit of a shift in our perspective. I recall as a boy actually watching Song of the South. I recall watching it in the theater, and I seem to recall watching it on television one time. It was a good movie. We enjoyed it. But I will share this with you, a little bit of a shocker. I don't think Song of the South would make my top 10 Disney movies. I enjoyed it. I thought it was good. I loved the music. I loved Zippity Doo Dah. But it was definitely not one of my favorites. And it's an older movie. When we talk about missing an attraction, will I miss Splash Mountain? Yes, it brings back memories for me and my wife of when we were children. And we recall Uncle Remus and Zippity Doo Dah and Brer Rabbit. I have a son, though, who's a recent college graduate. So he's only been around since the early 2000s, late 90s. For him, Song of the South doesn't mean as much as it does to me and my wife. But do you want to know what his favorite Disney movie or one of his favorite Disney movies is right now? You guessed it, Princess and the Frog. He loves Princess Tiana. He loves Mama Odie. He loves Ray. And his favorite villain has got to be Vasilier. He loves the music to Princess and the Frog, and he is looking forward to what Disney is going to re-theme Splash Mountain as. He's looking forward to what songs they may use from the movie. He's looking forward to seeing the characters that he likes to see in the ride. And when I see how excited he is for the ride to come about, it kind of makes me happy too. I don't believe Walt would be unhappy with this re-theme. I believe Walt would look at it as something that has to happen. I know that doesn't make everybody happy, and I know there's a lot of people that are going to miss Splash Mountain, and guess what? You're allowed to. I know that after the new ride opens, there will be days that I will ride Princess Tiana's Bayou Adventure when I will say, I kind of miss the old ride. Just like when I ride Adventures of Winnie the Pooh now, there are times that I say, I miss Mr. Toad. But again, perspective. Having a sense of perspective helps me to know and helps me to find joy in what is there now. What would Walt think? I think he'd be fine. What would I think? I know I'm okay with it. So I know this may not have made everybody super happy, and I know you may disagree with me, and that too is perfectly acceptable. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope to hear from you. I hope you tune in when I release another one. Thank you very much.